Good afternoon. Whoa. I'm used to the ballroom upstairs where you really have to shout. I'm Doug Marker, president of the City Club. I was about to say president-elect, but I've been president now for 6 days. So getting used to doing this role. Welcome to a fun event for City Club, our Rant 2, What Will They Say This Time? First, I have a few announcements, and please, if you would, please turn down your cell phones and your pagers, especially in this small room. We'd appreciate it. Our forum next Friday is a forum on the long-term future of the Portland Development Commission, PDC. As you know, the club did an important report on the PDC a few months ago, and there have been a few events following that. We have Commissioner Randy Leonard and former PDC Chair John Russell participating. We have invited a representative from PDC, but so far none has confirmed participating. That invitation remains open. I'd like to remind you of the last week of our annual fund challenge. Our annual fund challenge goes up to June 15th, which gives you the opportunity to contribute to the City Club's annual fund and have your contribution matched dollar for dollar from sponsors Don and Mary Frisbee, Peter and Harriet Watson, Kaiser Permanente, and an anonymous donor in memory of Tom Deering. So again, that opportunity is through June 15th, and there are envelopes at the table. I'd like to remind you of the City Club's citizen salons this summer. Opportunities to gather at beautiful homes and have interesting speakers in a small informal format. We've already sold out 3, but we've added 2 more salons. Today's bulletin or our website have the list of salons. Detail on all of these events can be found in your bulletin or on our website, www.pdxcityclub.org. I'd like to extend a special thank you to Jake Okenberg and the membership committee for last night's rooftop membership party at the Jack's. It was well attended and a lot of fun. Met a lot of new members and people who are about to be members. Also like to thank our guests from the Oregon Performance Internship Program. Thank you for joining us here today. Our sponsors this quarter are Nike Incorporated and Kaiser Permanente. Please join me in thanking our sponsors. Today's format is what we call the Rant, which is a chance to invite some members of the local media to come up here, sit at the table, and make a few remarks initially, 3 to 5 minutes, on topics of their choosing, and then invite the City Club members to come up to the microphones here and ask questions in one word or phrase, meaning throw out a topic to our panel and let them respond. One word or phrase, PDC, Kulangoski, big pipe, something of that nature, and then let them respond. So anything you want. Our guests today are Sheila Hamilton, who is news director and afternoon co-host at KINK-FM 102. Sheila is one of the journalists around town who participate in just about every form of media, television, radio, and print. In addition to her work at KINK, she contributes articles to the Portland Monthly. Hank Stern recently became managing news editor at Willamette Week after 7 years at the Oregonian covering City Hall, Washington County government, and education in East Multnomah County. Before the Oregonian, Hank worked with the Associated Press here in Oregon and in Washington, D.C. Renee Mitchell is a columnist for the Oregonian and also an adjunct English professor at Portland State University, a beaded jewelry creator, a graphic designer, and artist. This year, she was nominated for the 2005 Pulitzer Prize for commentary. So I'll ask our speakers to come up to the table here, our informal bistro-style podium, and give each of you the opportunity to make your introductory comments. And then the first question will be asked by Carla Thomas, our board host, and I'll introduce her after this and remind you of the format.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sheila Hamilton. I want to first say that my comments today are not intended to offend, although I think that's why we were invited here, right? Before I begin, these are not the opinions of my company, KINK-FM. I had several potential rants that I wanted to talk about today because I can find some humor or irony in them. Governor Kulongoski and his sudden interest in Texas Hold'em and slot machines. I think that our new state slogan could possibly be, Oregon, take a chance with us. The federal government, once again, proving that states' rights is an oxymoron. Now we can't kill ourselves or get stoned when we're terminally ill. That is like so bogus. Or the sheer gall of the Democrats in the legislature to suggest that Oregon corporations should pay more than a $10 minimum tax. That's like asking utilities to stop fleecing citizens for local taxes that they never end up paying anyway. I can also find irony in our white boys club known as the Portland City Commission, where the only diversity is a gay man. The PDC's bidding process looks a bit to me like it was taken from a script from The Sopranos for next season. And finally, a little jab at the Portland Tribune, whose mantra is closer to home, but they're now going to be closer to Walmart in Milwaukee. But it really was the quote of a mother in the Oregonian this week that made me decide if I have 4 minutes before you today, I want to talk about something very serious. Michelle DeFord told the Oregonian, the Iraq war should be in people's faces every day until they choke on it. And I couldn't agree more. Her 37-year-old son David was killed there, and as Michelle said, none of the reasons that we were offered for invading Iraq have stood up. I am still constantly flabbergasted as to how our president can take our nation to war under one premise, then change his reasoning again and again to suit the political flavor of the month and never, ever be held accountable. We have 1,600 American soldiers that have died in that war, and the longer we're there, and the more money we spend and the more we learn, the less sense it makes. The evidence that this war was waged on false premise continues to pile up. The Downing Street memo makes clear that President Bush wanted intelligence that justified a war no matter how the facts had to be bent to get there. But the Downing Street memo is really just one more document in a huge, long string of evidence. The 9/11 Commission report, the David Kay report, the Dulfor report, and hundreds of other sources, including the testimony of Treasury Secretary John Snow and terrorism advisor Richard Pearl, all proof that President Bush was obsessed with invading Iraq at any cost. I think the jig is up, and it's not because of dogged reporting by our press. I think the public is finally reaching its own tipping point on this war, and not because our reporters chose to embed themselves with the troops or wear flag pins on their lapels. A Washington Post ABC News poll this week says that a majority of Americans now say the war wasn't worth it, and our casualty count there has already gone too high. And I think perhaps worst of all is the fact that most Americans say we're not any safer because of this. So if Americans are coming to their own realization that the war in Iraq is not being won, the conviction that it probably wasn't necessary is not far behind. And here's where I think it gets really dangerous, that the public skepticism is now falling over into the Army's ability to recruit. For the first time since 1999, the Army is falling short of being able to get young men and women to join, even when they're offering Xboxes. A Department of Defense survey said last November that only 25% of America's parents would tell their kids to join the military. That's down from 45% just the year before. And I think Oregon has suffered mightily because of this war. Our National Guard troops have been called up at the highest per capita level of any state, but they've been poorly equipped and poorly trained, and our casualty rate is considerably higher than Army troops. They've been subject to involuntary extensions, and their families and employers have had to bear the hardship of accommodating their absence. I'm not a war historian, but I do know one thing. Wars are really easy to get into and damn hard to get out of. and after 2 years in Iraq, the loss of more than 1,600 American lives, who are we going to turn to begin the discussion about how to get out of Iraq? This is not a liberal or a conservative issue. I think it's high time we ask our local lawmakers and our congressional representatives to demand a rational exit strategy for Iraq. Otherwise, we are going to bankrupt our treasury and destroy thousands more lives. We were not told the truth getting into this war. I think we should demand the truth about when and how we get out.
Thank you very much for inviting me here today. I've got to tell you, I've been in journalism for 18 years now, and nobody ever has asked me to rant in public. So it does lead to one basic question. What took you so long? 18 years does make for a lot of pent-up frustration. Although I've got to confess, I do have some practice at ranting in private. Just ask my wife. If I get a couple cups of coffee in me on a Saturday and the subject of the Bush administration or college football comes up, I can go off like Mount St. Helens. I'm hoping to be a little bit more constructive today. Just like too often, I'm sure many of you get frustrated when we paint you in print as one-dimensional cutouts. Believe it or not, there are times when I'd like to be known as more than that person annoying many of you with a call on your cell phone in the middle of dinner. I want to use this time that you've so graciously granted me today to talk not as a journalist, but as a parent, as a sports fan, and a human being. As a parent of one daughter in 3rd grade in Portland Public Schools and another son entering public school 4 years down the road, I cannot tell you how sick and tired I am already of the annual back and forth. The school year will be cut, it won't be cut. It's gym class, it's music, it's neither. Our neighborhood school will close. It won't close. $5 billion, $5.2 billion. I got to tell you, I think all these annual quibbles miss the point. And that point is we spend more money each year, yet continually face the threat of larger class sizes, shorter school years, and the like. It's not that teachers aren't working hard enough. To me, it comes down to benefits. In other words, health care and PERS climb faster than anybody can keep up. In the David Douglas School District, which I do consider a very well-run place from my time covering it a few years back, health costs and retirement expenses are both rising well above the cost of inflation. Nearly 20 cents of every dollar in that district goes to those two items, and that share of the budget is up about 50% in the last 5 years. So when politicians come around looking for your vote, don't let them get away with promises to go down to Salem and really make those folks listen this time around. There's that old joke that every lawmaker is an expert in schools because each of them went to one once. Well, it sure seems that way when their idea of solving this problem is swearing to find an extra $100 million here or cut the administrative fat there. That's fine. If they can do it, great. But we need political leaders willing to fight for much more deep-rooted change and maybe even lose their office over it. We either decide a strong public school system is a worthy common goal and do a major overhaul on the revenue side or the expenses side. I don't much care which. You either raise a lot more money for schools with a sales tax, a restaurant tax, a hotel tax, something, or you go with the benefits side by reducing retirement benefits for new teachers going forward, but making it up to them with deservedly higher wages that at least have some cost certainty. Or get a hold of healthcare costs at the national level with a single-payer plan, socialized medicine, anything. Anything else to me strikes me as just so much guano. Rant number 2. I'd like more major league sports in this city. I know many people couldn't care less and think it's both a waste of time and money that could be much better spent on education and other essentials. But it sure feels like a lot of that opposition I hear is thinly disguised snobbery from people who can't imagine why anybody would actually care about something so pedestrian as baseball. Now, before you start throwing your meals at me, to those who say the city should care more about big league education before baseball, I say amen. But are we electing politicians so dim-witted they can't focus on more than one thing at the same time? Of course schools, cops, roads matter more than baseball, but is it really going to hurt any of those essentials if somebody, anybody at City Hall at least is open to bringing in a fun attraction for Portland 80 nights a year? And then I hear people say the public shouldn't spend a dime on this or be remotely on the hook if projections don't pan out. And believe me, that makes total sense. But apply that same test to a lot of other things I enjoy in Portland or would enjoy doing. I love Portland Center Stage, but is it really vital to the good of the order that it move into the Armory? I'd enjoy a downtown public market, but is that an essential this city can't live without? You know what all those projects have in common with Major League Baseball? They're all part of the fabric that makes up a city. And just as Portlanders can make an argument they shouldn't have to fly to New York for good theater or drive up to Seattle for the Pike Street Market, there are a lot of us who would enjoy a Major League Baseball team in town. And I know I can't come here and quantify why it's neat to be a sports fan. You either are or you aren't. All I can tell you is my daughter and I have been going to Beavers games, and as a parenthetical, I'd urge you all to go. It's a very fun time, since she was old enough to run the bases after games on Sundays. And I happen to think those memories of trying to explain the infield fly rule to her while she's eating cotton candy will one day be things she can look back on with a smile. The minor leagues are fun, but it would be nice if those of us who do care about the childish thing, that I do admit it is childish, is sports, could have a major league product to watch. Last rant, and thank you for your patience. No, last rant coming up. That wasn't the last rant. It's been 18 years. And this one's in my role as a human being. The subject, gay marriage. I'm 40 years old, so I'm in the position of looking back on the civil rights struggle for African Americans and asking people who were 40 then how they could have sat still while human beings got lynched and threatened when they tried to go to school or vote. I am not equating African Americans' uniquely 300-year horrific struggle for equal rights with the gay rights movement. I am comparing what it's like to end up on the right and wrong sides of history. I'm sure there were plenty of well-meaning whites 4 decades ago who thought, you know, those blacks have a point, but they really need to be more patient. Why are they forcing things before they're ready? Now fast forward to today. And true confession here, when I first thought about gay marriage, my first reaction was, why now? Civil unions give similar rights as marriage. Let's take this one step at a time. But then I thought about my daughter and son, and when both of them are 40. Do any of you really think at that point society won't have realized that two people who love each other should have the right to get married? We can dither all we want about too much too soon, but I, for one, do not want to be answering questions from my children then about how I chose to be on the wrong side of history. I would urge all of you to ask yourselves where you want to be years from now when that question comes up. Thank you very much. For letting me get this all off my chest. I know my wife also thanks you. This will be one Saturday she'll be spared my rant.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Renee, and I'm really glad to be here. And for those of you who read my column know that I rant quite often on the pages of the Oregonian. But what you probably have not heard from me is a rant in poetry. Here it goes. 9/11 erased the hyphen on my American. But too many of us are still prisoners in this promised land where most people are too broke to give you a hand, but 13-year-old meth addicts will break in to see what you got. Drug dealers won't even look to see whom they've shot, and downtown panhandlers will get in your face if you don't stop. Put it all together, and what have you got? Hard times, a fistful of nothing but a Glock to put you in enough shock to make you give up your goods without a fight. But our county jails are so overcrowded that petty criminals don't stay in for more than one night. Sure, Portland is livable, but that depends on what street. Whether you ever experienced hunger or whether you're inspired by the people that you meet, what if you don't have a place to live? Don't have a bench to lay your head and sleep? No money for medicine, kids don't have enough to eat, but in the Pearl you can get a condo for $1,000 per square feet. Being livable depends on your view or your point of view. And from where I sit, I think that we still have a ways before livability is an equal opportunity thing. I mean, look at the way we live in this city. They say segregation was America's version of apartheid, but somebody lied when they said it was over. Sure, life's fine if you can pay the rent, or like Vicki Phillips, ignore the evidence that racial inequality in schools hasn't gone away. It's just hidden in the prism of low expectations and in classes they call special education, reserved for kids that teachers can't teach because it's hard to reach students whose stomachs are growling, or who don't sleep because mama's in deep with a habit that she can't fix from 9 to 5. And even if she were able, it's so much easier for schools to just attach labels: ignorant, illiterate, empty-headed. Because the Brown versus Board of Education ruling changed America, but it didn't change minds. Integration hasn't cured racism or closed the achievement gap, and that's a fact. The Brown ruling changed America, but it didn't change minds. And it's no wonder why our young people look at us and wonder, isn't hope just a fallacy in this democracy? They see us turning our heads as society window dresses misery and puts justice for the colored on a 50% off sale. They see how corporate dynasties are allowed to pollute our faucets, and Enron and Wilshire execs are rewarded for hiding corporate losses, and the minimum wage mules keep on plowing the fields of the wealthy while our schools crumble, while our Oregon health plan crumbles, while our economy crumbles. So we fix it with budget cuts and more taxes. Anything we don't cough up, the government takes out of our assets. Even heaven has a hold button these days. Too many damn requests coming in at the same time. Dear God, what the hell is happening here? Hello? Hello? Racism, sexism, classism, ageism, we're all caught up in the ism dressing room when the whole world is a stage. And we're rehearsing our own demise with this so-called Patriot Act. We're tagging our own democracy. Gotcha. You're not it. We counter our own intelligence while justice plays hide and go seek, and the future is bleak because hunger and drugs and AIDS and illiteracy is ever present here while our country is fighting to eradicate it everywhere but here. We still haven't found Osama or the sender of the anthrax powder, but Bush believes he saved Iraq from Saddam by dropping bombs on Iraqi women and children. He told us we're not the ones to blame because we took their lives to prevent Hussein from starving them to death. Can't you see? It's all worth it because we're making their country free. We are the heroes, I think. America is out to save the world and save the space shuttle program and save the whales, and yet we cannot save ourselves from hovering on the edge of extinction because there are kingdoms still left to destroy. So the feds tell us to buy duct tape and hope for the best. So I rest my case. Democracy is an illusion, and a hero is nothing but a sandwich. Thank you.
Okay, so you get the idea. Now it's your turn to ask, again, questions in the form of one word or phrase. And the first question will go to our board host and new program chair, Carla Kelly, who is General Counsel for the Port of Portland. Carla? And, excuse me, just sorry. Please line up at either this microphone or this microphone, and I'll clear out a space here for people to come up. Now, Carla.
I'm not sure if it's one word or a phrase. Big box retail. Address to the panel or anybody wants to answer.
Go ahead.
Oh, I shop at Home Depot. I love that place. You know, I think that there's room for places like that, and there is a need. But I also am a big supporter of locally owned businesses, and I think that people should be given an option. But it's also up to the community. If they feel like they don't want the place in their neighborhood, they should be able to speak up, and we have. For them not to be there. I'm totally in support of what the neighborhood wants to do. If they don't want it there, I'll go find it wherever it is and go shop there.
Yeah, it seems sort of incongruous to plant them in the middle of active city neighborhoods, but out, where land is more plentiful along the light rail line, for example, it seems to make a lot of sense to me.
I know that in my parents' hometown that used to have a thriving, adorable downtown with dozens of business owners able to feed their families, big box retail has destroyed their town. They now have one Costco, one Home Depot, and the rest of the town is pretty much vacant. And I really think it's something that we as citizens need to be very, very wary of, that it does eliminate competition.
Erwin Mandel, City Club member. 3 letters, P-G-E.
Well, obviously, if the city can make the case that it's cheaper, I mean, that seems like a no-brainer to me.
I think Tim Boyle was right.
I tend to think that the city has really looked at the options for a utility, and putting it back in the hands of a company like Enron is the absolute worst thing we could do. So that we need to actually work with our partners beyond Portland so that other communities feel like this is a deal that's going to be viable for them as well.
Steve Novick, City Club member. Gordon Smith voting this week to confirm a judge who thinks the minimum wage is unconstitutional.
I think on the flap over the filibuster, he probably showed he's not the greatest poker player in town just because he got called out on that as not being the moderate that he comes back here every 6 years to portray. So I think increasingly it becomes more difficult as the Republican Party drifts rightward nationally for him to straddle that line.
Ray Polani, a City Club member. You mentioned downtown, and I mentioned the region and downtown and the city, and I mentioned the people that are coming. How about a big tube to finally accommodate a lot of people in and through downtown?
You mean if the big pipe doesn't work out?
I thought that's what the OHSU tram was. No? Where would you put the big tube? Yeah, I always thought under had to be done first, like it was in New York City. Those kind of projects to me sound so wonderful, but they seem almost impossible once the city has been built like we have with so much infill. So I'd love to hear from the engineers in the room. Hank, are you one? No?
I'd love to see that money spent on schools.
City Club member, local bloggers.
I'm thrilled by them. I love Blue Oregon. I think that bloggers serve an amazing purpose, that they keep the mainstream press responsible and they keep the mainstream press on their toes. And I'd like to see them become more organized.
Actually, I take the opposite point. I like that they're disorganized because it seems to me it's the free market coming into play. You find a new blog, it's boring, or it has nothing to say, and it seems to go away. The ones that have survived, and I think we know there are probably about 3 or 4 that many of us check on a daily basis, are funny and provocative, and I confess, I read them every day.
Yeah, definitely.
Lily Mandel, City Club member. Divided nation.
Blue versus red, is that? Yeah, that. Left, right.
I think Obama had it right. I think that there are plenty of people in Texas who would welcome a gay neighbor. I think that there are plenty of people in Portland, Oregon who believe in a Jesus Christ. I don't believe we have a divide in this nation. And I think if the left and progressive people were able to actually get more people to come to the polls, that we would have seen a landslide election.
I also think, there's probably a little bit of historical perspective here in that, there have been plenty of times in our history when this country has been more divided and nastier. I mean, you think about the McCarthy era, you think about when the country was first founded and some of the things that were said about Jefferson and Washington and Adams. I mean, nasty, nasty stuff. I mean, yeah, it would be nice if we were all together, but as long as both sides, and the left probably does need to do a better job of engaging, I don't see what's wrong with a healthy debate, as long as I guess that at some point you come to a conclusion at the end of the line, and maybe that's what we're not coming to. That's what your point is going to.
Kurt Wavering, member. Guantanamo and the Geneva Convention and its quaintness.
I think if somebody had told me 10 years ago that we would have a prison where we went to our judicial experts to find a way to torture prisoners, I would have said, this is not the United States of America. That cannot happen here. And I am still reeling from being able to accept the fact that some Americans think that it's not only tolerable, but something that we should do.
I also think it goes back to the whole wrong side, right side of history. I think in 20 years, hopefully sooner, people are going to look back on this and just be baffled, as many of you are, I suspect, today.
I just don't think this is the first time that it's happened. I think this is probably, we're more aware of it because it's gotten more press, but it's certainly not something new that our military's been guilty of.
David Poole, City Club member. Portland's neighborhood association system.
You must have read my last column. I think there's a lot of good things about the neighborhood association. It really has brought more people to the table, but the system as is has allowed a lot of bullies to step in and really kind of run the neighborhood association in a way that's not healthy, that can be a little unproductive. And I think what's happening in Southwest, with the Southwest Hills Residential League, is a prime example of the need to have some kind of controls on when people are suing their own neighbors and having such problems communicating, and the city is refusing to step in and to do something about it, and to pick sides is just, it's not healthy. And how is this going to end beyond people just kind of deciding to be reasonable? I think we have a great foundation of a system in here. It's getting national kind of kudos for what we do, but there's some real problems and some real issues that I don't think the city is really addressing. There isn't enough embracing of the diverse cultures that are now moving into Portland. And there was some attempt to do that. I don't know that it's been very successful, but I just think it's an opportunity for people who want to get involved in their neighborhood to do so, but it's an opportunity for people who have agendas to pursue those agendas to the exclusion of the rest of the neighborhood, and that's wrong.
I also think, like any 30-year institution, at some point they evolve without somebody taking a hard look at them into form over substance. And those who master the form and have the time and the energy to do that drive the agenda. And I think that's probably what's happened in too many cases.
John Polinick, member. Public financing for city elections.
On the national level, there are all these polls that, ranking issues for people. This one usually falls on the bottom. I guess I have a really hard time getting past the fact that the mayoral election that just passed proved the exact contrary of what this particular proposal advances. So, it couldn't have come at a worse time for them, although they managed to pass it anyway.
I actually wrote a column supporting the idea of considering this because, I take a little bit of a different view. I think it was it was good that it showed that someone who doesn't collect a lot of money could win, but it also, when you look at the city council right now and realize that they're all white men, I look at it and see something still needs to be changed there, and I think it's an opportunity to at least try and see if it works. I mean, we're going to come back and see whether we want to do this permanently, and I think it's just an opportunity to find out whether it really does work without making a huge amount of a commitment of city funds.
My comments would mirror Renee's.
Joan Hoffman, member, Portland cake, Vancouver icing.
If you're talking about the number of people who come here and use our services and then drive home and pay, you know, nothing on their property tax and hardly anything in terms of other kind of taxes, you know, and I don't know if that's your point, but I think there needs to be a much better accounting of how Oregon's getting screwed. I have several friends, and I won't name their names, but they've taken their windfall from corporations and dumped it into investment houses over there, and they're renting them out so that once they finish the 5 years or whatever it is that they have to have those homes rented, they'll be able to have a capital gain windfall of over $250,000 free and clear. And I'm thinking this is happening under our nose, and we really have not paid attention to what happens to our state economy because of Vancouver's willingness to play fast and loose with the rules.
Well, see, I don't blame the people who are actually moving into Vancouver because they are getting a better deal. What my issue is the arrogance of the city of Portland to ignore all of that and act like it's not happening. And because it is happening to our detriment, we're losing tax base to Clark County. I mean, our Rose Festival princess lives in Vancouver. So, I mean, this is something we need to pay attention to, and we're not. And the people in Vancouver are saying, here we are, and I don't care if you really pay attention to us because we're still going to do our thing. And so there is some movement from some folks in City Hall that are trying to pay attention to this, but we are ignorant to it to our own detriment.
Before I answer, full disclosure, my in-laws live in Vancouver, so I mean, it sort of makes you ask the question, why are people moving over to Washington? And if it's because the tax system makes more sense with a sales tax, I mean, maybe that's worth taking note of.
Cynthia Kirk, City Club member, and my own personal rant in this context is that Renee's column is not carried in every edition of the Oregonian.
My boss is here. Did you hear that?
Yeah. I was hoping someone of influence might be here. But for general discussion, I guess the failure of local legislation to ban handguns or firearms in general in public schools.
Lars Larson. You know, this is when I'm constantly befuddled that something as no-brainer as that we shouldn't be having handguns at our public schools cannot pass a state legislature with very bright people and people on both sides of the aisle who must support gun rights. I support gun rights. You know, I grew up with guns. We come from a family that hunts. I understand the amendments to protect your right to carry a gun. The fact is they don't have a place in our public schools. To me, it's a no-brainer.
Yes.
I don't think vending machines belong there either.
Christine Anderson, City Club member, Gorge Casino.
You know, I have a hard time thinking of getting up on Sunday morning, putting on my shorts and my tennis shoes and saying, honey, let's go play roulette. I think that this is, again, this sort of fallback position that our state takes when we won't take a serious look at tax reform and of other funding mechanisms for the things that we get. I understand Ted Kulongoski is pushed into the corner on how we fund this state. But it seems to me that gambling, with all of the problems that gambling brings to people's family and the debt load that they accrue and how it goes onto the backs of the lower class, is just plain not fair.
I moved to Portland from Detroit, who just put up a bunch of casinos, a couple of them downtown. And I was able to see the kind of impact that it had on, the detrimental impact that it had on people in the community and those who could not even afford rent, trying to win their rent money by playing the lottery and the machines. And it's just, I just don't think it's a good idea. I think it promotes a lot more, brings a lot more negativity in the end than it will. And I think I agree with Sheila that we need to get serious about what we really want to do with our funding, rather than looking for somebody to come in and provide the solution for us.
I also think an equal, if not bigger, issue is just rather than where it's located, but the other forms of gambling, like video slots, that are more pervasive and actually get into the heart of poorer neighborhoods. And to me, I guess the bigger issue is the fact that we are financing any of our government on that is an embarrassment.
I'd just like to add one thing. I'm hoping that Governor Kulongoski saw the news item yesterday of the Eugene mother who had been convicted of stealing the identity of her son who was serving in the Iraq War because she needed to play video poker. Those stories are important.
Dan Glasson, Oregon performance intern, corporate media conglomeration and Clear Channel Communications. Thanks.
I have very, very strong opinions about conglomeration and Clear Channel, and I also would like to keep my job.
Is it my turn? Andrew Wheeler, a member. Do great cities have freeways on the riverbanks that flow through them? I'm talking about the East Bank Freeway, of course.
No, but in the sort of the priority list, I guess, of things that need immediate attention, it wouldn't be on my top 3. I'm sorry, on the priority list of things that need immediate attention, it wouldn't be on my top 3 or 5. But you're right, they don't.
Marilyn, now, oh, sorry.
Can I just add to that? One of the things that I appreciated about Mayor Katz was her willingness to kind of look out there in the future. The reason that I moved to Oregon was because there were a bunch of people here in the 70s that were looking into the future. It was a very, very tough time for Oregon, and nobody could dream because the economy was terrible and people were really down and out. But you know what? They had visions about where we need to go. And I hate to see this conversation about moving the freeway put to the side because we're in such a dire state right now. I think we still need to entertain these ideas that are visionary and will ultimately take Portland to be an amazing city.
Marilyn Albers, member, Portland City Club.
I want to know why I've never been asked to join. No. I think that these kind of forums where people can talk about the issues that are dear to our hearts and why we love this city so much are so important that I think membership recruiting and how to get young people and a diversified audience into this room should be your #1 goal. You know, all the work that this club does in terms of the funding issues and PDC, and I would like to see that same sort of energy put into how do we bring more young, diversified faces into this room. Wow.
Well, I actually thought Wendy was trying to do that.
Renee, where were you last night?
I was there at Jack's on the roof. Where were you?
That's my point. You sidelined.
Oh, okay. I was there. No, I think the City Club is an essential. I didn't agree with there was a story that I saw about City Club versus Portland Business Alliance. I didn't really understand that. But I think that the City Club has done recently anyway, done a fabulous job of involving more young people in providing programming that young folks would be interested in. The salons, I think, is a great idea, and the book club, and stuff like that, I think, is, and the change in location. I think we're pretty good ways to try to engage with the community on a street level, because I think that there was a problem with the perception of people and what the city clubs was all about and who they were, really. And I think that's starting to change a little bit, so.
And I also think you just face a very tough environment if you subscribe to the bowling alone theory of declining civic involvement all across the board. It's pretty difficult, I guess, to keep vibrant, but it does seem in the last couple of years as if a real effort has been made here to do that.
Especially with those reports lately with the PDC and.
Yeah, absolutely.
Keep it up.
Hi, Utah. Francis Lancaster, City Club. Unfunded pension liability.
This is with the firefighters. Yeah. I don't know why we're not paying more attention to this, because it's going to come back and really bite us. And that's part of the reason why we can't seem to get our act together with the different budgets, is because we're not really addressing, nobody wants to touch that issue. And, you know, it's been a problem for years, and I think we need some leadership, not just folks in leadership positions, but some real leadership to try to take that on, as well as the whole PERS issue and what we're going to do about that. I mean, we got to do something about that, because it's really, it's really going to hurt us.
Somebody's going to have to boil it down to voters so they can understand in sort of the maelstrom of campaigning that it's something that's 20 years down the road and you have to make the change now. And in the 10 seconds it took me to explain that, you lose a lot of people. And I think that's why a lot of politicians have not taken that on, or they've tried and they've seen what's happened and just said, well, you know, put that on the back burner.
Justin Gottlieb, City Club member. $400, $500, $600 a square foot for property. Where does it end?
You haven't checked out the borough lately. You know.
You know what, I personally think that, again, market forces are going to be market forces, and when you have a great city, people are going to pay $1,000 per square foot. But I think that the onus is on the city and our leaders to make sure that we actually do have a commitment to affordable housing. If indeed we're going to have the Pearl, we need to have a community for people who have been displaced from the Pearl. And I think that in the early 90s that there was a real commitment on the city commission to do that, and I don't see the same kind of energy toward it now, because it is a conundrum that our prices are rising so high.
Paddy Tillett, member. Quality of architecture in Portland.
I don't know much. Yeah,
You know, one of the things that I did when I was trying to decide where I was going to come in my 20s was visit 4 major cities on the West Coast. And the architecture and the architecture that's been allowed to stay and has been upgraded is one of the reasons why I chose this city. I think that the new architecture that we have going up is a little bit, it doesn't, to me, have the same sort of spark that Minneapolis might, or that you actually see in some of these great cities. But I am proud of the work, especially in terms of density housing, that our local architects are doing. I think they're making a real effort to make the city look good. I'm proud of it.
I think the whole idea of keeping the facades of buildings, even if you have to build kind of behind it, is a very innovative and fabulous idea, and makes part of what makes Portland. But as far as the quality of the architecture, you know, weather the lines, I mean, that's just beyond me.
Corey Allen, City Club member, White House Press Corps.
Meh.
It suffers from any sort of pack journalism type situation where you're dependent on crumbs, especially in this White House where they have a unique discipline, it seems to me, from very far away at keeping actual news away. That's not to say that the White House press corps is as dogged as it needs to be, but just given the way that is structured, where you have however many number of people jammed into a room, it's the perfect storm for bad coverage with this White House, and I think the results are obvious.
Kurt Wavering, member. Ballot Measure 37 and the threat to our land use planning system.
I think the proponents of it were probably right, just from the standpoint that it was a release point for a lot of pressure that had built up. But this willy-nilly sort of netherworld, to mix metaphors, that we're in now, I can't believe that was anybody's intention. And now that, to throw one more metaphor in, that the genie's out of the bottle, I don't know how you put it back in.
I also thought it was interesting that the national conversation going on about Oregon elections was not so much about gay marriage, and it wasn't so much about some of our other local initiatives. It was about Ballot Measure 37 and what it would do nationwide to other communities that were trying to do anything to control sprawl. So I think it was a huge setback for the environmental community to see that we couldn't defend that, and that we probably should have done a better job in terms of knowing that the assault was coming.
Erwin Mandel, we don't often get a second bite at the apple. One name, Donald Rumsfeld.
He's a bully, and he has bullied his way to having his viewpoint in the administration, and he's bullied reporters, and people have let him get away with it.
Ray Polanyi again. I-5 from Oregon, through Oregon, from Canada to Mexico. Suggestions for additional bridges, for widening, maybe double-decking, heaven knows what. How about rail? Freight rail, passenger rail. We need it desperately, and it would cost a hell of a lot less and do a hell of a lot more. I'm reminded of Tom McCall. Come visit, but don't stay. I would suggest come visit, but only one automobile per family.
We need you up here next year.
David Poole again. Medical marijuana.
The courts can say what they will. I think it's probably too ingrained here for anything to really change. I don't see what, if there's not some sort of local commitment to enforce it, what difference will it make? The court ruling.
I actually had hoped that if the federal government were indeed going to invalidate our medical marijuana laws, that they would have the cojones to come in and arrest people in wheelchairs and see what the public thinks about that. Because I really think that's where the discussion about marijuana in general needs to come to, is out into the open, so that people can really see the people who are actually helped by this. I have a very, very good neighbor who is able to live a pretty prosperous life because of medical marijuana. His MS is so bad without it. And now he lives in fear every day that the law will somehow change, or maybe are they going to come or are they not? This shouldn't be. If we pass a law, if we have as a state declared that marijuana is helpful for people who are terminally ill or who have these disabilities, then we should be behind it and make it very clear to the federal government to stay out of our business.
It is fascinating what the federal government chooses to focus on. Medical marijuana, assisted suicide. I mean, are these really the crying issues of our time? It's staggering.
I'm Julie Young, City Club member. What would be your recommended use of the land where the Central Post Office is? And I think I know what Henry's going to say.
It would be a lovely baseball stadium, yes.
I thought he was going to say a big box retailer.
G06 City Club member. Thefts from a public resource like a library. Who would steal from a library?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Theft from libraries.
Well, I'm just glad somebody's finally paying attention to that. Because, you know, I had heard about it a while back, and, you know, it's incredible. There are DVDs and CDs and books that the library has not kept track of. For them to have the mechanisms in place to be able to stop people from taking stuff out of the library and don't turn it on because it saves money, it just doesn't make any sense. And so this has been going on a long time, and it's about time, you know, people started talking about it, because, I mean, I know a guy who, we went out to Bend, and he had like hundreds of CDs, jazz CDs, that I copied, that all had Multnomah County Library on it. I mean, you know, it's a joke, basically, and it's caught, and you know, with all the budget problems that we have, and the library hours being cut back and that kind of thing, we could easily have solved some of our budget problems by just taking the time to be diligent and accountable with the resources that we have. And I mean, yeah, let's do something about it. It just makes sense.
And that one was, I mean, to me, it seems so easy to have taken care of. And you watch every county election that they ask for money in the next 5 years, opponents are going to cite that as one of the examples. And it seems with a little bit of forethought, they could have taken care of that.
Well, I didn't see Dick standing up here, but he might be asking the same question. How do we restore trust in government?
Elect trustworthy politicians. I mean, it's not that, I don't think it's any more complicated than that. If people who will do their level best to do what they said they would do and hold them accountable. I think if that happens, you will have trust in government. For people who are paying attention, you have a large share of the population that's tuned out. But for those for those who are opinion leaders and paying attention, that's to me seems like how you do it.
I also think that the public needs to have some accountability too. We can't just depend on our government to trust them. I think we need to be looking through documents and attending these meetings and keeping track of the campaign promises and saying, this is what you said you were going to do, and why haven't you done it? Part of the problem is that people don't trust government is because that they're too lazy to make the government accountable to what government said that they were going to do. I mean, in a lot of ways, democracy isn't ideal. We have to keep that on track constantly, and it all involves us as citizens being involved in our governments, and we can't just sit back and expect people to do the right thing. You know, we have to be in their face and make them do the right thing. So it can't be about, oh, we don't trust government. Well, what have you done to make sure that the government is trustworthy? And not only the people you elect, but what they accomplish.
Dick Tracy, City Club member, Social Security.
I mean, I think the Bush plan has gone through any number of versions of justification, sort of like the Iraq War, and none of them have really proven to stick. I don't think there'll be much change down the line, would be my guess.
As much as I think that the Bush plan right now is bogus, I really do think there is something to the idea that we should be looking long-term, just like we should be looking at the possible movement of that freeway. That out there, it is a problem, and just to brush it aside as saying that there isn't a problem, I think is putting our heads in the sand. And, you know, I'd like to see these kind of discussions come up at the local level even, where people could say, well, what would work? What is fair? You know, this sudden age mark where President Bush says if you're over 55, you don't have to worry, where's the equity in that? I've paid into the system since I was 15 years old, and just because I happen to be in my 40s, I bear the brunt of it. It should be a system we work out where there's equitable changes that go across the board. And I like the discussion about Social Security because I do think ultimately we need to tweak it.
Marilyn Albers, PDC.
Full Employment Act for investigative reporters. I mean, I don't know why, you know, there was, in the announcement, they said they wouldn't, or they have not responded yet to your invitation next week. I mean, if that's the case next Friday, I think that speaks volumes.
And we'll be here next Friday to see. Sheila, Hank, Renee, thanks very much. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you. And we're adjourned. Thank you.